America divided.
America's never been more divided.
America has never been more divided than it is today.
We hear that so often that we start to think it's true, except it isn't. There are actually a lot of big things we agree on. Things that might even sound radical, or left-wing, or even socialist. A group called Data for Progress recently commissioned a huge series of polls in every congressional district in the country. They asked people using neutrally worded questions whether they favored about a dozen progressive policies. The results defy the establishment's talking point that Democrats can only succeed if they operate from the middle. Here are 5 radical ideas that Americans from the reddest of states and the bluest of states can agree on. Americans overwhelmingly support legalizing weed. Like, really, really overwhelmingly support it. According to Data for Progress's polling, the majority of Americans in every single congressional district want to lift the prohibition on cannabis. That kind of across-the-board support is virtually unheard of. Even at least 50% of Trump voters across 49 states concur. Despite the country being in virtual agreement on the matter, only 52 of the 535 representatives in the House and Senate co-sponsored the Marijuana Justice Act. What's one thing that every American can agree on? Our politicians are too corrupt. The revolving door between Congress and K Street is forever spinning. Just look at Joe Crowley. When AOC beat him in the Democratic primary, he rebounded by getting a nice, cushy job at a lobbying firm that happens to represent private prisons and the fossil fuel industry. According to Data for Progress, a supermajority of Americans approve of a policy that would prohibit members of Congress from owning stock, force them to disclose financial and tax information, and ban them from becoming lobbyists. This is an area that America is seriously lacking behind other countries, but it's not for a lack of public support. People in every single state except Wyoming support paid family leave policy that would allow employees to take up to 12 weeks off from work for serious medical issues or childbirth. The proposal, written by Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, would be paid for by a 0.2% payroll tax, about the cost of a cup of coffee a week. If you flip on Fox News during any point of the day, there's a good chance you'll hear something about how those crazy socialists Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez want to raise your taxes. So you might be surprised to learn that a supermajority of Americans across all 50 states support their signature policy proposal. The duo introduced legislation that would cap credit card companies from charging interest rates higher than 15%, way down from the typical 25% APR you see advertised. While most states have laws in the book to curb outrageous interest rates, credit card companies can simply set up shop in Delaware, the Wild West for financial institutions, and charge the rest of the country whatever the hell they want. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to connect the dots and see why Congress hasn't acted on an issue that has such broad appeal. Credit card companies funneled more than $11 million into the 2018 midterm elections. Guns in the Second Amendment are a touchy subject in America. But one gun safety reform where we find agreement are extreme risk protection orders, or red flag laws. These allow family, friends, and law enforcement officers to petition for a temporary restriction on a person's access to firearms if they pose a risk to themselves or to others. Again, Data for Progress's polling found the vast majority of Americans in every state support this progressive legislation. 17 states have already passed red flag laws and seen tremendous results. In Indiana, firearm suicide rates have dropped by 7.5%. In Connecticut, suicide rates have dropped about 13%. But the Second Amendment is such a taboo subject in America, thanks to the NRA, that even the most common sense ideas may never see the floor of the United States Congress. Data for Progress's study found even more progressive policies the vast majority of Americans support, from ending the war in Yemen to changing the way our government funds pharmaceutical research. I encourage you to read the findings of their new Progressive Agenda project, along with Eric Levitz's take on the study in New York Magazine. The truth is, there are some issues like abortion or immigration where Americans have serious disagreement, But this data proves there is more that unites us than divides us. So maybe it's not the proverbial middle-of-the-road American that politicians are worried about upsetting. It's their wealthy donors looking out for their special interests by blocking legislation from behind closed doors.